I am Eleanor, 34 years old, a successful real estate developer in Boston. My life seemed perfect with James, my husband of 10 years, until I discovered his affair with Sophia, his colleague. As an anniversary surprise, I had bought a beautiful vacation villa in Cape Cod, never imagining it would become the stage for confrontation. When I found out James planned to take her there, I contacted Andrew, Sophia's husband. We set a trap they never saw coming. If you are ready to hear how I turned the tables on their betrayal, please subscribe, and let me know where you are watching from. James and I met 12 years ago in graduate school at Boston University. I still remember that autumn day in the campus library when he asked to share my table because all others were full. He had piercing blue eyes, a charming smile, and a confidence that drew me in immediately. Our conversation flowed easily from business ethics to favorite travel destinations, and by the time the library closed, I knew there was something special between us. Our courtship was a whirlwind of intellectual discussions, weekend adventures exploring New England, and mutual ambition. James was pursuing his MBA with a focus on marketing while I was completing my master's in urban development and real estate. We pushed each other to excel, staying up late to edit papers and practice presentations. When we graduated, he proposed on the steps of the library where we first met, and 6 months later, we were married in a small but elegant ceremony. The early years of our marriage were defined by mutual support and shared goals. James landed a position at Tucker & Reed, a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Boston. I joined Landmark Properties, a growing real estate development company specializing in luxury residential buildings. We rented a modest apartment in Cambridge, saving every penny for our future dreams. Those first years, we were a team in every sense. James would bring home marketing campaigns to get my perspective, and I would share property development plans for his input. We celebrated every promotion and bonus together, slowly climbing our respective corporate ladders. By our 5th anniversary, I had been promoted to senior developer, and James was managing major accounts at his firm. Success came with longer hours and greater responsibilities. I often worked 60-hour weeks, arriving home exhausted but fulfilled. James's schedule became equally demanding as he took on international clients. We bought our first home in Beacon Hill, a beautiful brownstone that needed renovation. Weekends once spent hiking in the Berkshires were now devoted to networking events and home improvements. We cultivated a social circle of similarly successful couples, hosting dinner parties where conversations revolved around property values, market trends, and professional achievements. From the outside, we were the perfect power couple that others aspired to be. Our Instagram feed showcased vacation photos from Nantucket skiing trips to Vermont and charity galas, where we dressed in our finest. But over the past 2 years, something shifted between us. It started so gradually that I dismissed the warning signs, attributing them to normal ebbs and flows in a long-term marriage. James began coming home later, citing client dinners and work emergencies. Our conversations, once flowing with ideas and affection, became practical exchanges about household matters and schedules. Intimacy faded from our relationship. Date nights became rare, and when they occurred, James seemed distracted, checking his phone repeatedly. In bed, he turned away more often than not, claiming exhaustion. I told myself we were just going through a phase that all marriages experienced lulls. Other signs appeared that I chose to ignore. James started wearing a new cologne I had never selected for him. His wardrobe subtly changed, with more fitted shirts and designer shoes appearing in his closet. When I commented on these changes, he mentioned a company initiative to update their professional image. Then came the password changes. The phone that once lay unlocked on our coffee table was now guarded. Our shared laptop required a new password I had to ask for. The shared calendar we had maintained for years became sparsely populated with his entries, many vaguely labeled as meeting or work event. Credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I had never heard of on days he claimed to be working late. When questioned, he explained them as client meals that would be reimbursed, yet I never saw those reimbursements hit our account. I made efforts to rekindle what we had lost. I planned surprise date nights at restaurants where we had celebrated milestones. I reduced my work hours, turning down a major project that would have required extensive travel. I suggested couples therapy, framing it as maintenance for our relationship rather than a response to problems. James dismissed the idea, saying we were fine and just busy with our careers. After months of trying to deny the growing distance between us, I decided on a grand gesture. I had been saving for years, building a separate investment account James knew little about. With my recent promotion to executive developer, I could finally afford the dream we had often discussed during happier times, a vacation home on Cape Cod. I found the perfect property in Chatham, a stunning villa with a private beach access, 4 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and panoramic ocean views. The negotiations were intense, but I secured the property below market value, recognizing its potential as both a personal retreat and investment. I kept the purchase secret, planning to surprise James on our upcoming 10th anniversary. When I finally revealed the surprise, showing James photos of our new vacation home, his reaction was lukewarm at best. He commented on the maintenance requirements, the distance from Boston, the impracticality of a second home we might rarely use. Where I had expected excitement and gratitude, I found criticism and concerns. Still, I attributed his reaction to work stress and surprise at such a major purchase. I suggested we plan a weekend to visit our new property, proposing several dates in the coming month. James checked his calendar and claimed conflicts with each suggestion, finally agreeing to a weekend 6 weeks out. I was disappointed but understood his schedule was demanding. I focused instead on furnishing and preparing the villa for our first stay, hoping it would reignite the spark in our marriage. Little did I know then that this property, bought with such hope and love, would become the stage for the greatest betrayal and transformation of my life. The discovery happened on an ordinary Tuesday. James was in the shower and his phone chimed with a message on the bedside table. I had never been the type to snoop, priding myself on the trust in our relationship. But something about the late-night messages and growing distance between us had planted seeds of doubt I could no longer ignore. I glanced at his phone screen and saw a message preview from Sophia T. that read, "Can't wait for our weekend away. Going to make it special for you." My heart raced as I picked up the phone, finding it locked with a password I didn't know. When James emerged from the bathroom, I confronted him directly, asking who Sophia was and what weekend they had planned. His reaction told me everything. Before he even spoke, his face flushed and his eyes darted away from mine. He claimed Sophia was a new account executive, the weekend was a team retreat, and I was overreacting. The explanation came too quickly, too rehearsed. When I asked to see the full message, he refused, citing client confidentiality. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his even breathing and wondering when we had become strangers. The next morning, I called my most trusted friend Megan, who listened patiently to my suspicions and gently suggested I needed concrete evidence before jumping to conclusions. 2 days later, I contacted a private investigator recommended by a colleague who had gone through a divorce. I felt sick making the appointment, as if the very act of hiring someone to follow my husband was an admission that our marriage was already over. The investigator, a former police detective named Diana, was professional and compassionate. She took details about James's routines, Sophia's name, and the locations they might frequent. 2 weeks of surveillance yielded results I had simultaneously expected and dreaded. Diana provided photos of James and Sophia entering a boutique hotel downtown, having intimate dinners with hands clasped across the table, and kissing in his car outside her apartment building. The most damning evidence was a video of them shopping for jewelry, where James purchased a necklace I had never seen. When Diana handed me the folder of evidence, I couldn't open it in her office. I took it home, waited until James left for a business dinner, and then spread the photos across our bed, the very bed we had shared for years. The physical proof of his betrayal hit me with a force I wasn't prepared for. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath between sobs that racked my entire body. For hours, I cycled through emotions I didn't know I could feel simultaneously. Rage that made me want to destroy everything he owned. humiliation that I had been so blind, grief for the marriage I thought we had, fear of an unknown future. Most surprisingly, underneath it all, a strange sense of relief at finally knowing the truth. Once the initial shock subsided, I began researching Sophia Thompson. Social media revealed a polished professional woman in her early 30s, recently promoted to senior account executive at James's firm. Further investigation showed she had been with the company for 5 years, was married to Andrew Thompson, a professor at Northeastern University, and had 2 children. The discovery that Sophia was not only married but a mother added another layer of betrayal. This wasn't just about my husband and me anymore. There were innocent children involved, a whole other family being deceived. I found myself wondering if Andrew knew if he was suffering the same doubts and suspicions that had plagued me. My first instinct was direct confrontation. I drafted numerous scenarios in my mind, showing up at their office, confronting them at a restaurant, sending the evidence to company leadership. But each plan felt inadequate, too impulsive, likely to result in denial or minimization of their actions. I needed time to think strategically to decide what outcome I wanted from this situation. Did I want to save my marriage? Was that even possible after such a betrayal? Did I want revenge, justice, or simply clean closure? These questions kept me awake for nights on end as I maintained a facade of normalcy around James. The breakthrough came when I checked our shared digital calendar and noticed James had blocked off the exact weekend I had suggested for our first trip to the Cape Cod villa. The entry simply read, "Management retreat," with no details. Suspicion gnawing at me, I accessed his email through our shared laptop, something I had never done before. In his inbox, I found confirmation of his deception, a reservation inquiry he had sent to a local restaurant near our villa requesting a romantic table for 2 during that weekend. The email mentioned celebrating a special occasion with Sophia. My husband was planning to take his mistress to the home I had purchased as a gesture of love. The audacity of his plan transformed my pain into cold determination. If James and Sophia wanted a special weekend at my villa, they would certainly get one they would never forget. But I couldn't execute this plan alone. I needed an ally, someone with as much at stake as I had. I needed to contact Andrew Thompson. Making the decision to reach out to Sophia's husband was one of the hardest moral dilemmas I had ever faced. On one hand, he deserved to know the truth about his marriage, just as I had needed to know about mine. On the other hand, I would be delivering news that would shatter his world and potentially impact their children. After days of internal debate, I concluded that Andrew deserved agency in his own life, the opportunity to make informed decisions about his future. Continuing in ignorance while his wife betrayed him seemed a worse fate than the temporary pain of truth. I researched Andrew Thompson carefully before making contact. He was 41, an associate professor of environmental science at Northeastern University, with an impressive publication record and strong teaching evaluations. His university profile showed a thoughtful-looking man with kind eyes and a slight smile, someone who seemed passionate about his work and students. Rather than confronting him directly with all the evidence, I sent an anonymous email suggesting his wife might be involved with a colleague. I included just one photo showing Sophia and James entering the hotel, but with James's face blurred. I provided a secure email address where he could respond if he wanted more information. This approach gave him the choice to investigate further or ignore the message. Andrew replied within hours, his message terse and demanding more information. I suggested meeting in person at a quiet coffee shop in Cambridge neutral territory, away from our respective homes and workplaces. I described what I would be wearing so he could identify me. The meeting was as difficult as I had anticipated. Andrew arrived looking harried, his eyes scanning the cafe suspiciously. When I waved him over, his expression was guarded, a mixture of anger and fear. I introduced myself simply as Eleanor, explaining I was the wife of the man his wife was seeing. The color drained from his face as I spoke. "This could be some kind of mistake," were his first words, more hopeful than confident. I slid a folder across the table containing printouts of Diana's photographs this time, with faces clearly visible. Andrew's hands trembled as he opened it. He stared at the images for a long time, his breathing becoming more ragged with each photo he examined. When he reached the last one, he abruptly closed the folder and pushed it away. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "About 3 weeks," I replied. "But based on what the investigator found, the affair has been going on for at least 8 months." Andrew's response shocked me. He slammed his fist on the table, causing nearby patrons to turn and stare. 8 months. That's when she started her big project with the new clients. That's when she started coming home late every night. God, I've been taking care of the kids, rearranging my teaching schedule, turning down research opportunities, all so she could. His voice broke, and I saw tears forming in his eyes, which he angrily wiped away. I offered him a tissue from my purse, feeling an unexpected connection to this stranger through our shared pain. As his initial shock subsided, Andrew told me about his 15-year marriage to Sophia. They had met in college, married after graduation, and had their first child while he was still in graduate school. He had supported her career ambitions, taking on more childcare responsibilities and household management so she could pursue promotions. Their children, Emma and Liam, were now 8 and 10. "I thought we were happy," he said, echoing my own thoughts about my marriage. "We had date nights when we could arrange childcare. We still talked about our days. Sure, things weren't as passionate as when we first met, but that's normal, right? We were building a life together, planning for the kids' college funds, talking about a trip to Europe next summer." As Andrew spoke, I recognized patterns similar to my own experience. The gradual distancing, unexplained absences, decreased intimacy, and changes in behavior that seemed insignificant in isolation, but formed a damning pattern in retrospect. Sophia had started working weekends, buying new clothes, being protective of her phone, and showing less interest in family activities. I shared my own timeline of discovery, the confrontation I had avoided, and the final revelation about the planned weekend at my Cape Cod villa. When I mentioned the villa, Andrew looked up sharply. "She requested that weekend off from family obligations months ago," he said. "Told me she had a professional development retreat that could help her secure a promotion. I rearranged a conference presentation to be home with the kids." This new information confirmed the extent of their planning and deception. Both James and Sophia had created elaborate lies to free up the same weekend for their romantic getaway. Andrew's initial reaction was what I had expected and feared. He wanted immediate confrontation, talking about storming into their office or sending the photos to their supervisors and colleagues. His anger was transforming into a desire for public revenge that would damage not only the cheaters, but potentially his children. I found myself in the unexpected position of being the voice of reason, suggesting a more strategic approach. "What do you really want from this, Andrew? Do you want to save your marriage? Do you want an amicable divorce? Do you want custody arrangements that protect your children? A public scandal might feel satisfying in the moment, but it could have long-lasting consequences." My questions seemed to penetrate his anger. He slumped back in his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "I don't know what I want yet. I need time to think. But I know I don't want my kids to see their mother humiliated publicly no matter what she's done." That first meeting lasted 3 hours, extending from coffee into a shared lunch, as we compared notes and experiences. By the time we parted, a tentative plan was forming. I told Andrew about the upcoming weekend getaway James and Sophia had planned at my villa. Instead of preventing it, what if we used it as the setting for a controlled confrontation? Over the next 2 weeks, Andrew and I met several times, developing a strategy and unexpectedly a friendship. We discovered shared interests in hiking and classical music. We talked about our careers, our childhoods, and the dreams we had for our futures before our marriages began unraveling. Most importantly, we discussed what we each needed from the confrontation. I wanted James to acknowledge his betrayal, to face me directly, rather than hide behind lies and evasions. Andrew wanted Sophia to understand the impact on their family, particularly their children, who had noticed their mother's increasing absence. Neither of us was certain if we wanted to save our marriages, but we both needed honest closure to move forward, whatever direction that might take. Our plan for the Cape Cod villa would provide the opportunity for that honesty on our terms in a setting where James and Sophia couldn't simply walk away. As the date approached, our tentative alliance had evolved into a genuine friendship forged in shared trauma. The confrontation would be difficult, but I no longer felt I had to face it alone. For the first time since discovering James's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of strength returning. The week before the planned confrontation, I threw myself into preparations with the same meticulous attention to detail that had made me successful in real estate development. The Cape Cod villa would become the stage for a carefully orchestrated revelation, and every element needed to be perfect. First, I contacted a security company to install discrete cameras in the common areas. As the legal owner of the property, I had every right to monitor my home. These cameras would serve dual purposes, providing security for Andrew and me while also documenting the confrontation in case James or Sophia later tried to distort what happened. Next, I gathered all documentation related to the villa's purchase and ownership. The property was solely in my name, bought with funds from my personal investment account. James had no legal claim to it, despite his plans to use it for his affair. I made multiple copies of these documents, placing them in strategic locations throughout the house. While I focused on the property aspects, Andrew prepared evidence of his own. He collected photographs of family events Sophia had missed due to work commitments that coincided with dates in the investigator's report. He brought children's artwork and school projects she hadn't seen, tangible reminders of the family life she was jeopardizing. We also discussed practical matters, how we would travel to Cape Cod separately, to avoid being seen together, which rooms we would use, and what scenarios might unfold during the confrontation. We exchanged emergency contacts and established clear boundaries about what was acceptable during the confrontation. There would be no physical intimidation, no destruction of property, and no public humiliation that might later affect custody arrangements or divorce proceedings. The day before James and Sophia were due to arrive, Andrew and I met at the villa. Driving up to the property filled me with conflicting emotions. I had purchased this home with such hope and love, envisioning years of happy memories with James. Now its purpose had been corrupted, yet perhaps it could still serve as the place where I reclaimed my dignity. Andrew arrived an hour after me, looking nervous but determined. We did a final walkthrough of the house, checking camera placements and deciding where the confrontation would ideally take place. The spacious living room with its panoramic ocean view seemed most appropriate, a beautiful setting that would contrast starkly with the ugly truths being revealed. That evening, as we prepared simple meals in the gourmet kitchen I had so carefully designed, an unexpected awkwardness developed between us. We had spent weeks planning this moment, sharing intimate details of our marriages, and building a strange friendship through shared betrayal. Yet now, alone together in a vacation home the night before, confronting our cheating spouses, the situation felt surreal. "Are we doing the right thing?" I asked, breaking the silence as we ate dinner at the kitchen island. "Sometimes I wonder if we should just send them the evidence and file for divorce without this confrontation." Andrew considered my question thoughtfully. "I've asked myself the same thing, but I need to see her face when she realizes what she's done to our family. I need that moment for my own closure, whether we try to rebuild or end things completely." His words resonated with my own feelings. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming agency in relationships where we had been deceived and disrespected. We needed this confrontation not to hurt James and Sophia, but to heal ourselves. As the evening progressed, our conversation deepened. Sitting on the deck overlooking the moonlit ocean, we shared aspects of our marriages we had never vocalized before. I was so focused on my career, on proving myself, I admitted. There were times I prioritized work over James, assumed he understood it was temporary, that the sacrifices would be worth it eventually. I'm not excusing his cheating, but I wasn't always emotionally available. Andrew nodded, staring into his glass of wine. "I got comfortable," After the kids were born, I stopped courting Sophia the way I did when we were dating. I assumed our relationship could run on autopilot while we raised the children. Maybe I became more of a co-parent than a husband in her eyes. These admissions weren't justifications for our spouses' betrayals, but they were important acknowledgments of the complexity of long-term relationships. Both our marriages had vulnerabilities that James and Sophia had chosen to address through deception rather than honest communication. "Do you think your marriage is salvageable?" I asked Andrew. He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. For the kids, I'd consider trying if she's genuinely remorseful and committed to rebuilding trust. But something fundamental has broken, and I'm not sure it can be repaired." He turned the question back to me. "What about you and James?" I thought about the years we had shared, the dreams we had built together, and the depth of his deception. "I'm not sure I could ever trust him again. And without trust, what's left? But I'm keeping an open mind until I hear what he has to say tomorrow." We stayed up late finalizing our approach, agreeing that no matter what happened, we would maintain our dignity. This wasn't about screaming accusations or violent confrontations. It was about calmly presenting the truth and observing how James and Sophia responded when their deception was exposed. The next morning, we prepared for their arrival. I received a text from James claiming he was at a work conference and would be unreachable for most of the weekend. The lie sent a chill through me, even though I had expected it. Andrew showed me a similar message from Sophia about her professional development retreat. We made breakfast together, neither of us eating much, despite the spread of food. As the appointed hour of their arrival approached, we moved to the main bedroom where we would wait until the right moment. Through the slightly open door, we would be able to hear their arrival and conversation, giving us insight into their true relationship dynamic before we revealed ourselves. At 11:30, we heard a car pulling into the driveway. Andrew squeezed my hand briefly in solidarity as we positioned ourselves to listen. The stage was set, and the confrontation we had meticulously planned was about to begin. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the quiet house, followed by laughter and murmured conversation too distant to distinguish. Keys jingled in the front door lock, James using the spare set I had given him for emergencies. The door swung open and their voices became clear, relaxed, and intimate in a way that made my stomach clench. "Finally," James said, his voice carrying easily through the house. "A whole weekend with no interruptions, no excuses, just us." "It's gorgeous," Sophia replied, sounding genuinely impressed. "You weren't exaggerating about the view. Your wife has good taste, I'll give her that." The casual reference to me as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than his wife of 10 years sent a wave of anger through me. I felt Andrew tense beside me, his breathing shallow as he heard his wife's voice. "Eleanor will probably never even use this place," James said dismissively. "She's too busy climbing the corporate ladder to take vacations. This place will sit empty most of the year." "Their loss our gain," Sophia laughed. "Andrew would bore me to death here anyway, pointing out native plant species and talking about coastal erosion. At least you know how to enjoy life." I glanced at Andrew and saw the hurt flash across his face before hardening into resolve. They moved through the house, their footsteps and voices growing louder as James gave her a tour. "Master bedroom," James announced, their voices now just down the hall. "King-size bed with ocean views. We'll definitely make good use of that." "Should we christen it now?" Sophia asked suggestively. "Later," James replied. "I brought champagne. Let's have a drink on the deck first and enjoy this gorgeous day." Their footsteps receded toward the kitchen. Andrew and I waited a moment, then silently moved to follow at a distance, positioning ourselves in the hallway, where we could hear their continued conversation but remain unseen. The sound of a champagne cork popping was followed by the clink of glasses. "To us," James toasted, "and to finally being honest about what we want." "To no more sneaking around," Sophia added, "to having the courage to build a life that makes us happy instead of staying in marriages that don't." They were discussing their future plans, I realized with a jolt. This wasn't just a fling, it was a calculated exit strategy from both their marriages. "Have you decided when you're going to tell Eleanor?" Sophia asked, her tone casual, as if inquiring about a business meeting. Not yet, James replied, and I could picture him swirling the champagne in his glass, the way he always did when contemplating something. The timing needs to be right. I'm up for that VP position next month. It would be better to wait until that's secured before complicating things with a divorce. Smart, Sophia agreed. I'm struggling with when to tell Andrew. The kids make it so much harder. I want primary custody, of course, but I don't want to completely disrupt their lives. Andrew's face flushed with anger beside me. He started to move forward, but I placed a restraining hand on his arm, mouthing, "Not yet." We needed to hear more to understand the full extent of their planning. We could look for places halfway between Boston and the kids' school, James suggested. That way you could have them on your days without a long commute. You're always so practical, Sophia said affectionately. That's one of the things I love about you. Andrew gets lost in abstract ideas and theories. He's never been good at real-world planning. Their conversation shifted to practical aspects of their imagined future together: schedules, living arrangements, financial considerations. It was surreal hearing them calmly plan the dismantling of our families while sipping champagne in a home I had purchased. After about 20 minutes, their tone changed, becoming more intimate. They moved to the living room, and through our vantage point, we could see them settling onto the sofa, James pulling Sophia close for a lingering kiss. It was time. Andrew and I had discussed this moment extensively, agreeing that a calm, dignified approach would be most effective. We wouldn't burst in screaming or throwing accusations. We would simply make our presence known and let the weight of their exposed deception do the work. I nodded to Andrew, and we stepped quietly into the living room doorway. For several seconds, James and Sophia remained oblivious, wrapped in their embrace. Then James happened to glance up, his eyes widening in shock as he registered my presence. He shoved Sophia away so violently that she nearly fell off the sofa. "Eleanor, what the hell are you doing here?" he exclaimed, jumping to his feet. Then his eyes shifted to Andrew, and the blood drained from his face. "Who's that?" Sophia turned, following James's gaze, and let out a small scream when she saw her husband standing beside me. "Andrew, oh my God, this isn't... we were just..." "Just what?" Andrew asked, his voice remarkably steady. "Just having a work meeting, just discussing the marketing campaign. Please finish that sentence, Sophia. I'm genuinely curious what explanation you have for being in another man's arms planning your future together while drinking champagne." "How long have you been here?" James demanded, trying to regain control of the situation. "Have you been spying on us? That's an invasion of privacy." I laughed, the sound surprising even me. "Privacy? In my house, James. The one I purchased with my money that you're using for your affair? That's an interesting perspective." "You two know each other?" Sophia asked, looking back and forth between Andrew and me, struggling to piece together what was happening. "We've become quite well acquainted," I replied calmly. "It turns out people who have been betrayed by their spouses have a lot to talk about." James took a step toward me, his expression darkening. "Whatever you think is happening, you've misunderstood. Sophia and I are colleagues working on a sensitive project that required discretion." "Save it, James," I said, holding up my hand. "We heard everything. Your plans for after the divorce, Sophia's custody arrangements for the children, your strategy to wait until after your promotion. We know this isn't a momentary lapse of judgment, it's a calculated deception." Andrew stepped forward, placing a stack of family photos on the coffee table. "These are from Emma's ballet recital last month, the one you missed for a client emergency. And these are from Liam's science fair, where he won first place and kept looking at the door waiting for his mother to arrive." Sophia's face crumpled as she looked at the photographs. "Andrew, please. The kids don't need to be part of this. We can discuss this privately like adults." "Like adults?" Andrew repeated incredulously. "Adults communicate honestly with their partners. They don't sneak around for 8 months lying to their families, planning secret futures while pretending everything is normal at home." James had recovered somewhat from the initial shock and was now shifting to aggression. "How did you find out? Have you been having us followed? That's pathetic, Eleanor. If you hadn't been so obsessed with your career, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere for companionship. It was a predictable deflection blaming me for his choices, but it still stung. I had prepared for this, though, and refused to be baited into a shouting match. I noticed the signs, James. The late nights, the password changes, the unexplained charges. I hired an investigator because I deserved to know the truth about my marriage just as Andrew deserved to know about his. You had no right, Sophia suddenly shouted, tears streaming down her face. You've ruined everything we were going to tell you both when the time was right, when we had everything arranged. When it was convenient for you, you mean, I corrected her. When James had secured his promotion using my support, when you had arranged everything to your advantage. You weren't concerned about our feelings, just your comfort and convenience. The confrontation continued with James and Sophia alternating between denial, anger justification, and attempts at emotional manipulation. James claimed I had been emotionally unavailable, prioritizing work over our marriage. Sophia tearfully told Andrew he hadn't appreciated her, had taken her for granted. Throughout it all, Andrew and I maintained our composure, presenting evidence when necessary, but mostly letting James and Sophia's own words and behavior reveal the truth. They had been caught irrefutably, and no amount of deflection could change that reality. After nearly an hour of increasingly circular arguments, I decided it was time to end this phase of the confrontation. I picked up a folder from the side table and removed the property documents I had prepared. This villa belongs solely to me, I stated, sliding the papers toward James. I purchased it with my separate funds, and it is registered in my name only. You have no legal claim to it. I want both of you to leave now. James's face flushed with anger. You can't just kick me out. I'm your husband. What's yours is mine. That's not how property law works in Massachusetts, especially with separately held assets, I replied, grateful for the consultation I'd had with my attorney. Check the deed. Call a lawyer if you want. This is my property, and you are trespassing. James stood his ground, crossing his arms defiantly. I'm not going anywhere until we resolve this. You can't ambush us and then expect to dictate terms. The tension in the room escalated dangerously. Sophia, seeming to sense that the situation was deteriorating, gathered her purse and stood. I should go. We all need time to process this. Running away again, Sophia? Andrew asked quietly. That seems to be your specialty. Running from commitments, from truth, from consequences. James grabbed Sophia's arm as she tried to move past him. Don't let them intimidate you. We've done nothing wrong. We fell in love. It happens every day. Let go of me, Sophia said, trying to pull away. This isn't helping. We need to regroup and figure out what to do. When James tightened his grip instead of releasing her, Andrew stepped forward protectively. Though not physically imposing, his presence was commanding in that moment. Take your hand off my wife, he said, voice low but firm. The room froze in tense silence. For a moment, I feared the confrontation might become physical. Then James released Sophia's arm, stepping back with a bitter laugh. Your wife? That's rich considering what we've been doing for months. Ask her who she wants to leave with today. Sophia looked trapped, her gaze darting between the three of us. Whatever response she had been about to give was interrupted by the sound of a notification from her phone. She glanced at it reflexively, then paled. The nanny, she whispered. Liam is running a fever. I need to go home. She turned to Andrew. I need to see the kids. Andrew's expression remained neutral. I've already called my mother. She's picking them up and taking them to her house. They don't need to be part of this mess right now. Sophia's face crumpled at the realization that even her children were now beyond her immediate reach, a consequence of her choices beginning to materialize. Without another word, she grabbed her weekend bag and walked out the front door. James watched her go with disbelief, then turned back to us with renewed anger. Look what you've done. Are you satisfied now? This isn't about satisfaction, James, I replied. It's about truth and consequences. Now please leave my property, or I'll be forced to call the local police to report trespassing." For a moment I thought he might refuse again. Then, with a disgusted shake of his head, he grabbed his keys from the counter. "This isn't over, Eleanor. You've handled this in the worst possible way." "No, James," I said as he stormed toward the door. "The worst possible way was betraying someone who loved and trusted you. Everything else is just consequences." The door slammed behind him, and suddenly Andrew and I were alone in the villa, the confrontation we had planned for weeks now over. The house felt eerily quiet after the emotional intensity of the past hour. We stood in silence for several moments, processing what had just happened. Then, without warning, my legs gave way beneath me and I sank onto the sofa. The adrenaline that had kept me composed and articulate during the confrontation drained away, leaving me exhausted and shaking. Beside me, Andrew collapsed into an armchair, burying his face in his hands. "We did it," I whispered, hardly believing it was over. "For better or worse, it's done." The immediate aftermath of the confrontation left me in a strange emotional limbo, suspended between relief that the truth was finally acknowledged and grief for the marriage that was undeniably over. As James's car sped away from the villa, Andrew and I remained in stunned silence for several minutes, the reality of what had just happened slowly settling around us. Eventually, Andrew broke the silence. "I should go check on the kids," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "My mother will be wondering what's happening." I nodded, suddenly aware of how different our situations were. While I had only myself to consider, Andrew had 2 children whose lives would be forever altered by today's events. "Of course. Will you be okay driving?" He assured me he would be fine, and we exchanged a brief, awkward hug before he left, promising to call later to check in. As his car disappeared down the driveway, I found myself completely alone in the vacation home that had been meant to strengthen my marriage, but instead had revealed its irreparable fractures. That evening I wandered through the empty rooms of the villa, touching furniture I had carefully selected, looking at art I had chosen to create a peaceful retreat. Everything now seemed tainted by James's betrayal and the confrontation that had unfolded in these rooms. I considered selling the property immediately, unable to imagine ever enjoying it as I had intended. My phone remained ominously silent. I had expected angry calls or texts from James, but there was nothing. This silence felt more unsettling than confrontation would have been. Where was he? What was he planning? Had he gone after Sophia? Or was he formulating some strategy to minimize the damage to his career and reputation? I returned to Boston the next day, anxiety building as I approached our Beacon Hill home. Would James be there? Had he already moved out? When I pulled into our garage, his car was missing. Inside the house appeared untouched, exactly as I had left it days earlier. A quick check showed some of his clothes and toiletries were gone, but most remained. He had packed for a short absence, not a permanent departure. That first week was surreal. I went through the motions of normal life, returning to work, attending meetings, making decisions about property developments, but felt disconnected from everything. Colleagues noticed my distraction, but attributed it to stress from a major project. Only Megan, my closest friend, knew the truth, providing much-needed support through daily calls and occasional impromptu visits with wine and comfort food. James finally made contact after 8 days, not in person, but through an email requesting I meet him and our respective lawyers to discuss next steps. The formal impersonal approach confirmed what I already knew: our marriage was beyond saving. He wasn't seeking reconciliation or even a personal conversation to process what had happened. He had moved directly to legal separation. I contacted Diana Foster, a divorce attorney recommended by several professional women in my network. She was reputed to be fair but formidable, specializing in high-asset divorces, where one spouse had contributed significantly more to the financial portfolio. During our first meeting, I provided complete financial records, property deeds, and investment accounts, as well as the evidence of James's affair. "You're in a strong position," Diana assured me. "Massachusetts is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. The villa purchased with your separate funds should remain yours. The court will consider the length of the marriage and his contributions, but also factors like his infidelity. While preparing for the legal battle ahead, I discovered something that cut deeper than the affair itself. James had been systematically moving funds from our joint accounts to a private account for months. The amounts were calculated to stay just below what might trigger my notice, small enough individually but substantial when totaled. He had been planning his exit strategy financially long before I discovered the affair. Diana added financial exploitation to our case documentation. "This shows premeditation and bad faith," she explained. "It strengthens our position significantly." 2 weeks after the Cape Cod confrontation, rumors began circulating at James's firm. Someone, perhaps Sophia in a moment of crisis, or another colleague who had suspected the affair, had reported their relationship to human resources. Both James and Sophia were placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into violation of company policies regarding relationships between managers and direct reports. James blamed me for the professional fallout, sending accusatory texts claiming I had contacted his company deliberately to damage his career. I hadn't, but his immediate assumption that I would resort to such tactics showed how little he understood me after 10 years of marriage. Meanwhile, Andrew kept me updated on his situation with occasional texts and coffee meetings. Sophia had returned home the day after the confrontation, but he had asked her to stay in the guest room while they decided next steps. They had agreed to present a united front to the children, for now explaining that Mom and Dad are working through some adult problems. Through Andrew's nanny, I learned troubling details about Sophia's parenting during the affair. The children had experienced increasing maternal absence, with the nanny covering more hours and handling school events Sophia had previously attended. There had been forgotten birthdays missed, parent-teacher conferences, and broken promises excused by work emergencies that we now knew were time spent with James. These revelations reinforced my growing conviction that ending my marriage was the right decision, painful though it might be. James had not only betrayed me romantically, but had systematically lied, manipulated our finances, and planned to use my professional success to his advantage before discarding our relationship. As weeks passed, I established new routines in a life without James. I changed the locks on our home after consultation with my attorney. I closed joint credit cards and opened new accounts solely in my name. I began the process of removing James from insurance policies, investment accounts, and our wills. Each practical step brought both pain and empowerment, a reminder of what was lost alongside a reclaiming of independence. The most difficult moment came when I packed away our wedding album and photographs, unable to display them, but not yet ready to destroy these artifacts of a relationship that had once brought joy. The first major holiday after our separation, Memorial Day weekend, brought unexpected challenges. We had traditionally hosted a barbecue for friends and colleagues, an event I decided to cancel, unprepared to explain our situation to our entire social circle. Instead, I found myself alone in our home, surrounded by memories of happier times. That weekend became a turning point in my healing. Rather than succumbing to isolation and grief, I accepted a last-minute invitation from Megan to join her family at their lake house. The change of environment and company of supportive friends provided perspective I had been lacking. I returned to Boston with new clarity about the future I wanted to build post-James. My professional life initially suffered from my emotional distraction. I missed details in contracts, was less creative in design meetings, and struggled to maintain the sharp focus that had defined my career. My boss, Thomas, called me into his office after a particularly scattered presentation. "Eleanor, you're one of our most valuable team members," he said kindly. "But something's clearly going on. If you need time off or support, the company can accommodate that." His compassion cracked the professional facade I had maintained. For the first time, I acknowledged the divorce to someone in my workplace, briefly explaining the situation without detailed accusations. Thomas's response surprised me. He had gone through a similar experience years earlier and offered not just professional accommodation, but personal understanding. With this unexpected support, I began therapy sessions with Dr. Carla Martinez, a psychologist specializing in recovery from relationship betrayal. Our weekly meetings helped me process not just the pain of James's infidelity, but my own contributions to our marriage's vulnerabilities. You didn't cause his cheating, Dr. Martinez emphasized in one pivotal session. That was his choice, his character failure. But understanding the dynamics of your relationship can help you heal and establish healthier patterns in the future. Through therapy, I confronted uncomfortable truths about myself, my workaholic tendencies, difficulty with emotional vulnerability, and habit of solving problems with money rather than communication. None of these justified James's betrayal, but acknowledging them was essential to my healing and growth. 3 months after the confrontation, I moved out of our Beacon Hill home into a temporary apartment overlooking the Charles River. The property had too many memories, and maintaining it alone made little practical sense. My attorney advised that selling the property and dividing proceeds would likely be part of our eventual settlement. James made several attempts at reconciliation, not through genuine remorse, but practical consideration. His affair with Sophia had ended messily when both faced professional consequences. His promotion had been permanently shelved, and he found himself socially isolated as colleagues and friends learned of his behavior. He sent flowers to my office with notes claiming he had made a terrible mistake. He appeared unannounced at restaurants where I was dining with friends attempting to join the table. He called mutual friends trying to arrange accidental meetings. Each attempt felt manipulative rather than sincere, focused on his discomfort rather than my pain. The final straw came when Diana uncovered evidence of other women James had been messaging before and during his affair with Sophia. What I had thought was a single relationship mistake appeared to be a pattern of behavior. With this discovery, any lingering doubt about ending the marriage disappeared completely. 6 months after discovering his affair, I met James and our respective attorneys in Diana's office to finalize our divorce settlement. He looked diminished somehow, the confident charm that had once attracted me now appearing hollow and calculating. When he attempted one last private conversation suggesting we were throwing away 10 good years over one mistake, I finally spoke my complete truth. It wasn't one mistake, James. It was hundreds of daily choices to lie, to betray, to manipulate. Each time you texted her, each time you diverted our money, each time you came home and looked me in the eyes while living a double life, those were all individual choices. I deserve better. I deserve truth. He had no response to that. Hours later, we signed the final papers legally ending a decade of marriage. I felt neither triumph nor despair as I wrote my signature, just a quiet certainty that I was finally freeing myself to build a more authentic life. My healing journey began in earnest once the divorce was finalized. The legal battle had consumed so much emotional energy that its conclusion left a strange vacuum, a space I could either fill with continued grief or new beginnings. I chose the latter, though the path wasn't always straightforward. The first month post-divorce, I fell back into workaholic patterns, staying at the office until midnight, taking on additional projects and volunteering for weekend site visits. The familiar rhythm of professional achievement offered comfort and distraction, but I recognized it as the same behavior that had created distance in my marriage. You're using work as a shield against feeling, Dr. Martinez pointed out in therapy. It's a familiar coping mechanism, but it won't help you heal. Her observation prompted me to deliberately step back from my unsustainable schedule. I declined a major project that would have required extensive travel set boundaries around evening work hours and began blocking weekends as non-negotiable personal time. These changes initially triggered anxiety about my career progression, but Thomas assured me my position was secure. With newly reclaimed time, I sought connections outside my professional circle. Through a colleague's recommendation, I joined a support group for divorced women navigating life transitions. Our weekly meetings in a community center conference room became a sanctuary where I could speak openly about challenges other friends couldn't fully understand. The group included women of varied ages and backgrounds. Lisa, a 62-year-old teacher whose husband had left after 40 years of marriage. Janelle, a 35-year-old mother of 3 balancing single parenthood with a medical residency. Rebecca, a 28-year-old newlywed whose marriage had lasted only 11 months before her husband's addiction issues destroyed their relationship. Despite our differences, we shared common experiences of betrayal, grief, and rebuilding. The group's diversity offered multiple perspectives on healing. Lisa's wisdom about finding purpose beyond relationships, Janelle's practical strategies for self-care amid responsibilities, Rebecca's youthful optimism about second chances, all contributed to my evolving outlook. Through the support group, I also reconnected with female friendships I had neglected during my marriage. I reached out to college roommates, former colleagues, and neighbors I had known only superficially. Many responded with surprising enthusiasm, revealing that they too had felt isolated within relationships or careers. These renewed connections reminded me who I had been before becoming part of James and Eleanor. I rediscovered my love for modern dance by attending performances with Heather, a group member who taught at a local studio. I resumed hiking excursions with my cousin Jennifer, exploring New England trails I had abandoned when James showed little interest. 4 months after the divorce, I took my first solo vacation a week in Sedona, Arizona, far from Boston's familiar landscape. I deliberately chose a destination without associations to James, a place where every experience would be uniquely mine. The red rock formations, desert trails, and vast star-filled skies provided a healing environment for reflection. During this trip, I learned to enjoy my own company again. I kept a journal, took photographs of landscapes, rather than posting on social media, and had conversations with strangers in cafes and on hiking trails. Without the pressure of maintaining a particular image or accommodating another person's preferences, I rediscovered simple pleasures, eating when hungry, rather than at scheduled times, changing plans, spontaneously spending an entire afternoon reading by the hotel pool. Upon returning to Boston, I continued therapy with Dr. Martinez, focusing on deeper patterns that had shaped my relationship choices. We explored my achievement-oriented upbringing tendency to equate success with worthiness and difficulty, expressing emotional needs directly. "Your value isn't in what you accomplish or provide for others," she reminded me in a particularly impactful session. "You deserve love and respect simply for who you are, not what you achieve or contribute." This concept profoundly challenged my self-perception and became a touchstone for my ongoing healing. I began practicing small acts of self-compassion, taking mental health days, when needed, expressing needs and preferences more directly, allowing myself to experience difficult emotions without immediately seeking distraction. Throughout this period, my friendship with Andrew Thompson continued evolving in unexpected ways. Our connection, initially formed through shared trauma, deepened as we supported each other through parallel divorce processes. We met monthly for coffee or lunch, discussing our healing journeys, co-parenting challenges in his case, and rediscovered aspects of ourselves. Andrew's divorce had proceeded less contentiously than mine, with both parties prioritizing their children's well-being. He and Sophia established a co-parenting arrangement, allowing the children to maintain stability in their home, while the parents alternated residency, a nesting approach that minimized disruption for Emma and Liam. I occasionally joined Andrew and his children for casual outings to museums or parks, carefully maintaining appropriate boundaries. The children knew me only as Dad's friend Eleanor, and I respected the delicate balance of their family reconstruction. Seeing Andrew's gentle parenting and commitment to his children's emotional health deepened my respect for him. 6 months. Post-divorce. I finally felt ready to address the Cape Cod villa, the beautiful property that had unintentionally served as the stage for my marriage's final act. I had avoided visiting, allowing the property management company to maintain it while I decided its fate. Part of me wanted to sell it immediately, erasing the painful associations. Another part refused to let James's betrayal claim, yet another thing I valued. After much consideration, I decided to reclaim the property on my terms. The first step was cosmetic transformation, replacing furniture, repainting rooms, and redesigning the spaces where the confrontation had occurred. I worked with an interior designer to create an environment that reflected my current aesthetic rather than the compromises of married life. The weekend after renovations completed, I invited 3 women from my support group to join me for a reclaiming retreat. We spent 3 days walking the beach, cooking elaborate meals in the gourmet kitchen, sharing stories on the deck overlooking the ocean, and creating new positive memories in spaces previously tainted by betrayal. That weekend marked a turning point in my relationship with the property. By filling it with friendship, laughter, and authentic connection, I began to see it as a symbol of resilience rather than loss. 2 weeks later, I returned alone for my first solo stay, facing the remaining ghosts of my marriage and finding them significantly diminished. My professional life gradually rebalanced as well. Rather than seeking validation through achievement alone, I began finding fulfillment in mentoring younger women in real estate development. I established a quarterly lunch series for female professionals in our firm, creating space for conversations about challenges unique to women in the industry. This initiative caught the attention of our company's executive team, who invited me to develop a formal mentorship program. The project ignited a new passion for creating equitable opportunities within our traditionally male-dominated field. I found myself energized by purpose beyond personal advancement. The experience inspired me to establish a small foundation supporting housing security for women leaving abusive relationships. Using a portion of my divorce settlement, I partnered with existing shelters to create transitional housing options that included financial literacy education and career development resources, a holistic approach reflecting my own journey toward independence and healing. Approximately 1 year after discovering James's affair, I encountered him unexpectedly at an industry event. He was accompanying a young woman I didn't recognize, clearly a new relationship. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and for a moment I braced myself for the wave of pain or anger such an encounter might trigger. Instead, I felt a surprising emotional neutrality. James appeared older, somehow less substantial than in my memory. When he approached with an overly casual greeting as if we were distant acquaintances, rather than former spouses, I responded with polite detachment. Our brief exchange contained no recriminations or attempted justifications, just the civil interaction of people whose lives had decisively diverged. Walking away from that encounter, I realized I had reached a milestone in my healing journey. James no longer held power over my emotional state. The man I had once loved, whose betrayal had shattered my world, now inspired neither love nor hate, just a mild curiosity about the flawed human being I had finally seen clearly. That same week, I heard through Andrew that Sophia was struggling professionally and financially post-divorce. She had eventually found a position at a smaller firm, but with significantly reduced salary and status. While I took no pleasure in her difficulties, I recognized the natural consequences of choices that had prioritized immediate gratification over integrity and commitment. Andrew himself had found unexpected growth through the divorce process. He had accepted a prestigious teaching position at Boston University, published research that had long been sidelined by family responsibilities, and developed a deeper relationship with his children through intentional, focused parenting time. Though neither of us had sought the dissolution of our marriages, we had both found paths to more authentic lives through the painful process. At my final therapy session with Dr. Martinez, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 18 months. I never imagined divorce as a pathway to self-discovery. I admitted. I always saw it as the ultimate failure. Life's greatest growth often comes through our most painful experiences, she replied. The question isn't whether we'll face hardship, but what will allow it to teach us. As summer approached, I hosted a gathering at the Cape Cod Villa, inviting friends both old and new to celebrate not just my healing, but the community that had supported it. Andrew and his children were among the guests, now comfortable companions, rather than allies in crisis. Standing on the deck as sunset painted the ocean gold, I found myself experiencing a profound sense of gratitude. Not for James's betrayal, certainly, but for the authentic life it had ultimately led me to discover. The marriage I had fought so desperately to save had actually been preventing my growth in ways I couldn't recognize until its ending. The path ahead remained uncertain. I had no way of knowing what relationships, opportunities, or challenges awaited. But I faced that uncertainty with a newfound confidence in my resilience and value. I had survived what once seemed unsurvivable, rebuilt what appeared irreparably broken, and discovered strength I never knew I possessed. Perhaps that was the deepest lesson of my journey, that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads directly to finding what you truly need. As painful as betrayal had been, it had ultimately guided me toward a life of greater authenticity, deeper connections, and more meaningful purpose than I had ever imagined possible. Have you ever experienced a painful ending that eventually led to a better beginning? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if my journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible after betrayal. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it.